Hello and welcome to the second part of our big long lecture on truth tables. So we are going to jump right into what we did at the end of the last time with an example. We're going to do it a little more rigorously here. So let's just start right off by looking at a statement, a compound statement. And this is pretty ugly. I've got a not B being anded with an A, and all of that is in an if then with not A. So you obviously wouldn't just look at this whole compound statement and just immediately be able to tell me what the truth values would be for it. You'd have to go part by part. So when I look at this, I see a section here. I see a part here. I see another part here. I see all these parts to it. And we have to go through each of those parts and figure out what those truth values are before we can continue on and get the truth value for the whole thing. And we did this last time. We did that with the if and only if, that biconditional. We did it on an example after that. I just never really called out the fact that that's what I was doing. So we're going to go section by section here. But the question is, what do I do when I'm in doubt about what order to do things in? I mean, here on this, I've given us some parentheses, which is nice. But what do I do in terms of order? So we have a nice sort of structure here for when I don't put parentheses in, or when there's not a clear order of how to do these operations. You do them in this following order, top to bottom. So we always start with negations, and then we do with ands and ors, and then we do if-thens, and then we do if and only ifs. So let's look at this in a couple examples. If I gave you these three statements here, we got to figure out the order in which I want to do these things, right? So I've given us A or B, and that's in parentheses here. And that's in an if then with not A. So the subparts that I need are going to be, I need an A or B portion. And I also need, sorry, I'm just trying to erase a little better. I also need a not A, right? Once I have those two portions, then I can just put them together in an if then, and I'm golden. Here, I need a not A. I also need a B and that not A. Once I have those, I can just do an if and only if with A, and I'm golden. And then lastly, this one's the doozy. I need a not A. Once I have that, I can do a B or not A. And then I also need an A and B, right? So there's sections here, there's sections of this and things that I need before I can carry out the entire full long statement. Now, let me try to confuse us a little bit. Let's look at this statement. A and B and C. We'll throw in a third there. If I give this to you, well, what order do I do things in? I mean, I told us back here, I said we do negations, then we do ands and ors, then we do the if-thens and if and only ifs. But these are just both ands. So which one do I do first? And this is tough because there's really not a right answer. I mean, some people might do this part first, but some people might do this part first. And you actually, in certain cases, you can get different answers depending on what you do first. And so in a case like this, I have to give you parentheses. I'll never write something like A and B and C. I have to give you parentheses because I have to tell you which to do first. So I have to write it like this. Or I could write it like this. And that tells you which to do first, to do those parentheses first. Let's do even another example as well. So let's take like A and B if then A or B. So here's the question. I haven't written parentheses, so what do I do first here? I mean, again, some people might look at this. You might see your sections there. Some people might look at this and see a section there, in an if B, then A. It kind of depends on how you read this, but this is where our rules here, our order will come into play. Remember, we do ands and ors before we do if-thens. So in this case here, there's a correct way to write this out. And it'd be with these parentheses added in. I'll add them in a different color. Let me be clear, I don't have to write these parentheses. It's helpful because you can see them nice and fully written out, and they're easy. It draws your eyes towards the portions, towards the sections of this compound statement. But I don't have to. If I write what I put on the top originally in blue, you should be able to follow that list of that order of operations. You should be able to know which to do first. And sometimes I'll do that. Sometimes I just won't write parentheses purposefully, so that you guys have to keep you honest, so that you gotta know those order of operations. So let's move on. Before I actually even talk about this example and these statements, I just want to make it very clear on what we were just talking about. The simple state, or the compound statement that's typed out there already on the slide, and what I'm writing here are very different things. Because what's typed out on the slide is me negating that entire part here, this entire compound statement. But what I've written in the blue, remember, we do negations before we do if-thens. So this in the blue is me negating A, negating B, and then doing an if-then with each of those parts. So these are very different things. So just want to point that out. Okay, let's go ahead and look at this example. And statement A, simple statement A, is Boulder is the capital of Colorado. Simple statement B is Alaska is more than twice the size of Texas. Now, given that we all probably live in Colorado and you're probably familiar, you probably know whether or not A is true or false. I'm not going to explicitly say it, but you probably know whether it's true or false. B might be a little tougher. And again, I'm actually not going to tell you. I know whether or not Alaska is more than twice the size of Texas, but I'm not going to tell you for the purposes of this example, because sometimes you don't always know, right? Sometimes I give you something like this statement: Alaska is more than twice the size of Texas, and you don't know whether or not that's a true or a false statement. So I'm actually not going to tell us whether A and B are true or false, okay? And we're going to end up making a truth table for this compound statement here. Before we make that truth table, let's go ahead and break this down. I start off with this negation right here. And so in words, verbally, I'm going to start off say it's not true that, and then I'm going to go into the rest of this compound statement. So I'm going to start off by saying it's not true that if A, right? So I've got my if then, and I'm starting with an A. So if A, right? A is everything that I'm highlighting in the red there. Then not B. Well, if A, then not B means I have then not B. And notice that I've included this little not here. Alaska is not more than twice the size of Texas. So given these simple statements, I have this compound statement that honestly is a mouthful. It is not true that if Boulder is the capital of Colorado, then Alaska is not more than twice the size of Texas. that's a mouthful. I'm not going to try and parse that out and figure out exactly what it even means. But the question is whether or not this statement is true or whether it's false, right? And this is where we got to be careful here, because remember, I haven't explicitly told us whether A and B are true or false or not. You probably know whether or not A is true or false. You might not know about B, but I haven't told us. So here's the whole, here's sort of the whole enchilada of these truth tables. It's not about whether this statement is in fact true or false according to the laws of the world and where capitals are and how big states are. It's not about whether or not this is true or false based on these facts. It's about whether or not this statement here is true or false, depending on whether A and B are true or false. And because you don't always know whether A and B are true or false, as I'm not telling you purposefully now, you have to try every combination. And so if we make our truth table, then what we're going to see here, you got to start off with A and B. But like we said, I don't know whether or not A and B are true and false. Let me just do some resizing here. So I'll repeat it just again, just to be very clear. I don't know whether A is true or whether B is false. So I have to try every combination of true and false between these, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm gonna say, okay, I'm not really sure if Boulder is the capital of Colorado. I'm not really sure if Alaska is more than twice the size of Texas. I just don't really know if those things are what they are. But let's say this. Let's just presume they're both true. I'm just going to make a guess, and let's just say they're both true. So I'm looking at this row here. Okay, if they're both true, then let's go look at this whole statement and figure out whether it's true or false. And we can do that, right? We've got our compound statement here. I'll copy that. So we've got our not if A, then not B. Let me make sure I copied that down correctly. Yeah, that's the same thing. So not if A, then not B. Whole big deal there. I need to end up with that. So I better first figure out what not B is, because I need that. Then once I have that not B, then I can do the if-then statement. Then once I have that if-then statement, then I can negate the whole thing. And then I'm golden. Gave myself almost too much room. Awesome. So let's just go step by step here. And I know I keep sort of repeating this over and over, but I want to make it very clear. I don't know whether or not A and B are true or false. I don't know what the capital of Colorado is. I don't know how big Alaska and Texas are. But let's just assume that they're true, that these statements are true for now. Because I don't know. So let's just assume that they're true. If they're both true, well then what is the value of not B here? Well, not B, I'm just looking at this guy right here. That's going to be false, right? Not B is going to be false because B is true. All right, great. Now, I'm trying to do if A, then not B. So what I'm just looking at is I'm looking at an if true, then false. And we've seen on our if-then tables, when you have an if true, then a false, that yields a false statement. And so the results here, when I then negate it, right? I'm taking this column here and I'm negating it, right? I end up with a true because I'm just negating that false. And so what I've done here is I have actually determined that if both of these statements are true, then this is a true statement. Now, you're probably sitting there and you're like, hey, Boulder's not the capital of Colorado. What are you talking about? A isn't true. But what I'm saying is that if it is, then this statement is true right there. And that's all I really care about right now. I don't care about whether or not A and B are actually true. I just care about whether this statement is true dependent on the values of A and B. So let's keep going here. And I went across on the row. You can also just come down in columns one by one and sort of do it, one by one. Let me do one more row straight across, and then I'll go down by columns. Just kind of show you what I'm getting at. So now we're going to assume, like, okay, I still don't know whether A and B are true. Let's assume that A is true and B is false. If that's the case, then not B is true. I'm just negating B there. Then I've got an if-then with A and not B. I'm not even looking here. I don't care about that. I'm just looking at A and not B. I'm looking at these T's. I have an if true, then a true. That's going to yield a true if you look back at your if-then table. Then I'm going to negate A, or excuse me, let me say that again. I'm going to negate this guy right here. Just slap a little negation in front of it. So my true right here becomes a false, and I'm all good. Now, let's just finish this out a little bit more quickly. Again, I don't know if A and B are true, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to assume that A is true or is false, and I'm going to assume that B is true. Let's just say if that's the case, then not B would be false. Okay, now let's just say, what if I said that they're, both are false, right? Then not B is going to be a true. So I'm just kind of filling out the rest of this column as I go through. I'm just looking at these two and I'm negating them to get my false true. Okay, if A, then not B right here. Well, if I have if false, then false, well, then I've got a true, and you can see that on your if-then table. If I have an if false, then a true, that also yields a true, and you can see that on your if-then table again. Then I negate these. I take each of these and I negate them, so I just put some falses in here. And there you go. So this is cool. What we've done here is, without even knowing whether or not these are true or false statements, you figured out every possible value for this statement here. And in fact, you could probably say, you could have a 3/4 chance of getting it right. You could say that this is false, and you'd have a 3/4 chance of being correct without even knowing whether A and B are true. You can almost say for sure that this is false. But if A and B are both true, then that big statement there is true. So that's sort of what we're getting at with these truth tables here. Now, because we're at the end of it, I'll let you know. Boulder is definitely not the capital of Colorado. That's definitely Denver. So A is false. Let's go ahead and circle that over here. So A is false. That's one of those two. And then B, statement B, Alaska is more than twice the size of Texas. It actually is. Alaska is actually quite a bit bigger than twice the size of Texas. I think it's like 2.3 or 2.4 times bigger, something like that. And so that's actually true. So what we're doing there is we're looking at that and that. So you can probably tell that we care about this row right here, because that's where A is false and B is true. And so really, whole lot of colors here. This is the thing that I know. This statement here that I've written out, this big old ugly statement, that's false, because we know that A and B are false and true respectively. If you didn't know that this was the row that you were looking at, you've got the rest of them. And so boom, you know whether that big whole ugly compound statement is true or false, depending on the values of A and B, whether they're true or false. We'll do a bunch more examples of this, and I'll leave that to you guys for the worksheets. That'll be it for this lecture.